Schmidt, the tweets continue this morning at 7:37. Donald Trump tweeted about the report out that the Obama campaign paid $972,000 to Fusion GPS. The firm also got $12,400,000 from DNC. Nobody knows who okayed. So, Michael Schmidt, even in the midst of indictments against his campaign chairman and indictments against a deputy campaign chairman and two people intimately involved in his campaign, Donald Trump still furiously trying to distract. This certainly what happened today and the news that broke this weekend that there were going to be indictments unsealed today points to the frantic nature of the activity of his allies on and off Twitter last week.
No, last week it really kicked into high gear in a way that we hadn't seen it certainly as coordinated since the president took office. But what you have to remember here is why Mueller exists. Mueller exists because it came out that Trump had said to Comey, hey, can you move past Flynn, and that there wasn't enough trust that the president could allow the Justice Department on its own to do this investigation, and that Mueller had to be created to basically build a moat around him, not necessarily to look at just Russia, but to look at people connected to the campaign, and that there wasn't enough of a perception of independence at the Justice Department that Mueller had to do this. So you may not see Russia today in those documents in the sense of questions of collusion and questions of the election, because Mueller's been looking at all of these larger issues related to the president, related to folks around him. And that's why he was created, and that's why he's moving forward today. And you may not see anything related to Russia and to these larger questions that have loomed and still remain unanswered about the election.
You know, Harold, also what's interesting is you go back to the day that Jeff Sessions recused himself, right? And then you go back to that extraordinary press conference, that extraordinary day when Rod Rosenstein appointed Bob Mueller. And those two guys, in doing something that enraged the President of the United States, they actually set in motion, actually, all of this that actually allows justice to be served. And justice includes, like we've said before, assuming that these two gentlemen are innocent until proven guilty. But this is why Donald Trump was so angry at Sessions and Rosenstein, and why I think Americans, despite the fact that they may not like both of those gentlemen, have to look at the decision. Democrats or whoever doesn't like Sessions and Rosenstein have to look at those moments and say they took a courageous stand, and because of it, we're going to get to the bottom of this.
It reminds you also of what Steve Bannon said shortly a few weeks ago, that this was maybe the dumbest decision the president's made in modern era, firing Comey.
Which, by the way, that's the third thing. Yeah, when he fired, this is happening today because he fired Comey.
The question I have for Ari is this. I listened to you closely your last two segments on your own. You talked about how the rules of court in the courthouse are very different than the rules in the public sphere and space. Speak to us a little bit about, if you can, 30,000 feet up. What does this mean for the White House, the president, and the interactions that can take place now that we actually have an indictment? We haven't seen it. We don't know what names are mentioned, time frames are mentioned. But give us a sense of how Ty Cobb and those in the White House, we heard Haley say he should be quiet. We heard Joe say less is more. Give us a legal sense of really what that means.
It's October 30th, 2017. Mr. President, call your lawyer and talk to your lawyer before you talk or type about anything regarding this. This president has been in office only 9 months. Big picture, we have never seen a criminal investigation result in indictments of senior officials tied to a president this fast in the first year in office, ever, full stop. So that is very bad news, and it also suggests, for a variety of reasons, both the public evidence and trail of underlying material that suggests enough evidence to charge a crime in our court system, and there are rules of evidence requiring that, combined with a president who has done things that on their face amount to evidence of potential tampering or obstruction, that you have this speed. It is precisely because of the underlying evidence and the president's behavior, including public behavior, including telling NBC's Lester Holt that he fired the FBI director with Russia on his mind. With this investigation, with this indictment today.
He also told the Russians he
and
rid
Joe,
of the meddlesome
and he
problem.
allegedly, according to Jim Comey's memo, which he discussed under oath before the Congress, told the Russians about that. And
I mean, that would be evidence that Matt Locke would look at and go, it's pretty good. Pretty good.
Just
when
one more question.
Telling the Russians, yes.
From Matlock.
For Matt Locke, yes. Just one more question. When you were talking to the Russians, now I'm confused. All right, with us now, let's bring in NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Pete, obviously, as Ari was pointing out, a remarkable morning. We've seen White Houses have to face indictments of sorts through the years, but not so early in a president's term. We're 9-10 months in, and here we already have two indictments of two of the key members of the president's campaign last year. What can you tell us this morning?
Well, we know that Paul Manafort has surrendered himself to the FBI, going to the FBI's field office here in Washington, D.C., in downtown Washington, not far from the U.S. courthouse, where he will then go later today for an initial appearance before a federal magistrate. These are very short hearings. He'll be told of the charges, advised of his rights. Presumably, Rick Gates will do the same. We don't know yet what the charges are. I think the big question here is how peripheral are these charges? Is this going to be a sort of building block thing where they then hope to use their testimony to try to get more at the higher ups in the campaign or people more centrally involved? We have to remember that Robert Mueller was brought in to look at whether Americans were helping the Russians meddle in the election. That's the key question. So the initial question here will be how peripheral are these charges? How central are they to Mueller's basic assignment?
Andrea Mitchell's with us and has a question for you, Pete. Andrea?
Well, one of the things that has been, we've seen that he has arrived at the FBI field office. Can you take us through, Pete, the process today? We know it's a very short hearing that will take place down at the courthouse, but what will now be taking place?
Well, this is a little unusual. First of all, it used to be back in, say, 10 years or so ago, if you were charged with a nonviolent crime, there would be what's issued by the court, something called a summons, which is basically a command for you to show up at the court at a certain time for a hearing. Then there was criticism that, well, you're treating white-collar defendants with kid gloves, but people facing drug charges or something else, they get arrested. That isn't fair. And so prosecutors in recent years have been even arresting white-collar defendants. But this clearly is different. I think it's interesting because, remember, earlier this summer, Paul Manafort had pretty heavy-handed treatment when Mueller's investigators basically sort of barged into his house early in the morning for a search. And if they wanted to do it the polite way, they could have said, hey, here's what we're looking for. Why don't you bring it to us? Clearly, it indicated there was a lack of trust for that search. But now they're doing it a gentler way, just simply telling him what time he needs to show up at the field office, where he may face some additional questioning, and then at some point today he'll be brought to the courthouse for a hearing. So it's something of an evolution. Perhaps this is the beginning of trying what you might call a charm offensive for Paul Manafort to see if he can give them more testimony.
All right, Pete Williams, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Some charm offensive. Katty Kay, but you
I
know.
guess it's better than going to his house and dragging him out, in front of
Right.
the cameras with cuffs on, right?
And a lot of people speculated early in the year that Bob Mueller was trying to send a message to him. Perhaps this is message number 2. Work with us, because we've got you dead to center. And of course, New York State is now talking about investigating Paul Manafort. And also, it's important, and I know Ari can tell us more about this, but it's important also to know that Bob Mueller has been thinking about Donald Trump's pardon of some of these suspects for some time. And they're already trying to figure out ways to work around that.
Yeah, and New York may have nixed some of that. I want to go to Michael Schmidt again. You said something earlier, Michael, I thought was interesting, is that we may not actually see Russia in these indictments. That doesn't necessarily mean that the White House should breathe easy today. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us?
Because obviously the biggest question out of all this has been
collusion.
Was there collusion with Russia? So what the White House will do today is they'll pick up these charging documents, they'll look at them, and they'll say, okay, where's Russia? And they'll go through it, and they'll say, where's the collusion? And if there isn't collusion there, they'll say, see, look, there is no collusion. There is nothing to it. I mean, they don't have really great cards to play, but that would be my guess is how they will play them, as they will say, look, I mean, at the end of the day, the campaign chairman will have been indicted and his deputy will have been indicted, but they will try and put their distance between and say, look, this is just a businessman who, you know, had some bad dealings and this has nothing to do with the larger questions. And look, Mueller has spent X amount of months and X amount of dollars and he hasn't found these things.
Right, but you seem to be suggesting that was erroneous thinking. Or would be erroneous thinking.
Well, I mean, who really knows? We haven't seen the documents yet. We don't have a sense of what, you know, where this could go, and this could be the beginning of something larger. This could be the first charges, and then they could try and put pressure on Manafort to give up something to them. Manafort's body posture on this all along has been that he has nothing to give up and that he will fight it. That has then, and I think we'll begin to see that today. I mean, his side has constantly said there's nothing to give up to the government.
NBC News White House correspondent Kristen Welker is at the White House. Kristen, what's the reaction you're hearing from inside?
Joe, I just got off of the phone with a senior official here at the White House. Let me read you so far the reaction and then do some analysis on the other side. This official says the White House has been saying for weeks the special counsel is moving far more quickly and deliberatively than people have been reporting. The fact that the special counsel is actively performing its duties do not come as a surprise to the White House. So that's really going to be the key message here. I think no surprise here. But behind the scenes, I can tell you that they were bracing for today. The president airing his frustrations over the weekend on Twitter, trying to put the focus back on his former rival, Hillary Clinton, saying that she's the one who should be under investigation for paying for some of that research that, of course, led to that now famous dossier. Part of his frustration comes, of course, Republicans are turning their sights towards tax reform. They're going to be unveiling the specifics of their tax plan on Wednesday. And then the biggest trip of his presidency, President Trump about to head to Asia at the end of this week. So I anticipate we're going to see some pretty strong pushback. In terms of what we'll see from the president today, he has a series of meetings with his Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, as well as his vice president. At this point in time, the press not allowed into any of those meetings, but we're certainly pushing for that so that we can get some reaction from the president himself, Joe and Mika.
So, Kristen, the statement is actually, it's the sort of statement that somebody like Haley Barbour, who we had on the show earlier, would recommend the White House put out. It sounds like an extraordinarily disciplined statement, given how undisciplined the president's been this weekend. Could you read that for us one more time? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This was, again, just moments ago from a senior White House official, Joe, and I'll walk you through it one more time. The White House has been saying for weeks the special counsel is moving far more quickly and deliberatively than people have been reporting. The fact that the special counsel is actively performing its duties does not come as a surprise to the White House. I think that's sort of the discipline message that you're going to be hearing. And one more point about that, Joe. Remember, the president's lawyers, Ty Cobb, John Dowd, have really been encouraging him to be more disciplined on Twitter. We'll have to see what his reaction is. Of course, as you point out, over the weekend, we saw some of the angriest tweets we've seen from him in quite some time.
No doubt.
Joe.
All right. Thank you so much, Kristen Welker at the White House. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.